Larry, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be with you, Casey.
Well, Larry, I'm excited to have someone with your background here on the podcast. And this isn't my first introduction to you. I think my first introduction to you was actually in the movie Power of Zero, where you had a conversation about reducing taxes today is equivalent to raising taxes on future generations. And I loved some of your takeaways that you had in the book. And you have such a wide range of knowledge that I can't wait to dive in. And Larry, I really want to start with this. So I was actually unaware. And I asked a few other individuals if they were aware of this, and they weren't as well. So at first I felt like maybe I was out of the loop, but apparently you had a presidential run in 2012 and 2016. I never even was aware of that.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, so few were. The press were not too interested in covering me. If I had $1 billion, I might have been able to win, but possibly. But the main reason I ran was I felt that economists had a lot to say about how to fix the economy, every different aspect, Social Security, taxes, healthcare, the banking system. We just had, big financial crisis. How do you get these institutions fixed so that education, so the country can grow like it has in the past and fulfill its dream? So I felt compelled to run to state what the right platform should be, because we have no economists in Congress, 535 members, no economists, no PhD economists for sure. Maybe so few of them went to, majored in economics in college. But, so it's like they were trying to build a bridge across the Hudson River, and there's not by themselves without a single civil engineer. The thing's going to crash in the ocean, in the water at some point. So the first time I ran, there was an online platform. It was very easy. It's called Americans Elect, but they folded, so my campaign folded. The second time I had to run as a write-in candidate, and I had to go around the country with a little staff, paying money to get people to get the registration going, and also to get people to sign. To have my signature counted, because Mickey Mouse can't be elected in this country, even if he gets all the votes, because he's not registered. Anyway, I was registered. I could have officially run. I was trying to say this, I'm taking this seriously, but the main thing I was doing was to put together about a 100-page platform, which I turned into a book, which is on my website. It's called You're Hired. It's not You're Fired, but it's You're Hired. It's a free download at kotlikoff.net. And it says, exactly what I think, but it's more than what I think. It's what other economists collectively think, because I interviewed a lot of people, or I talked to, I didn't formally put any interviews in the book, but I said, let me talk to the top health economists and see if they agree with what I have in mind. Let me talk to the top tax economists when it comes to tax reform or Social Security reform. Let's think about how that should be done, not just me, but talking to other people. So this is the consensus view of how economics as a profession believes we should be fixing these institutions. It's very easy reading. And so President Biden could read it. President Trump could have read it if he could read, if he could have read, had the time to read it. He didn't, but it's there. Okay. So I feel like that was the reason I ran, and, that it was useful exercise.
So it sounds to me like you never really expected to win, right? You urge your supporters to never send you a penny, and you're going against, as you said, billion-dollar budgets. So you couldn't expect to win.
Well, I thought maybe just PR would, the social media would take off, and that I wouldn't need any money, and that was my angle. Don't send me money. Just get, spread the word, and that we could win without money. But the media thought it was a big joke, because they weren't able to sit down and read the ideas or focus on the ideas. They wanted to focus on the fights between Trump and the other people, the ad hominem, all that stuff, all that crap. I wasn't into that. I was into, Social Security is $53 trillion underwater. It's 2.5 years of GDP. The official debt is 1 year of GDP. We've got 2.5 years of GDP, and that's a statement in the Social Security Trustees report, which is probably going to come out today or tomorrow, the latest report. And it's going to show continue to show an enormous unfunded liability, which means that everybody's Social Security benefit is in danger. Current retirees in the extreme, although it would be political suicide to cut their benefits, but also young workers may have to pay higher taxes, dramatically higher, like a third higher, to get this thing under control. Imagine you're now paying 12.4% of your pay, Casey, every month to the system to pay benefits to me. I'm older, a little bit older than you. How would you like to pay, a third more? Make that 16.3%. Would you like to lose 4% of your pay for the rest of your life to pay the bills that my bill, pay for me, because we have set this up as a Ponzi scheme starting under Eisenhower. He really got that going. So it's Democrat, Republican, Nixon jacked up the whole Ponzi scheme system dramatically. So it hasn't just been Democrats. But then the Democrats layered on Medicare and Medicaid, which did fabulous things for healthcare for a lot of people who were not covered, but had funded this on the back of our kids and grandchildren. So, so you're now facing not just an enormous problem with Social Security, not just an enormous problem with official debt, not just an enormous problem with Medicare and Medicaid, but the entire system is underfunded, defense spending. So to put it all together, if you look at what we do in economics, and I talked about this in this book, at which, you're hired to try and say, look, here's the problem. We have to fix these institutions to get our house in order, fiscally speaking. And if you look at all the outlays into the future, the government plans, according to the CBO, and all the receipts the CBO projects, the Congressional Budget Office projects collecting, this is the government, the main budget number keeper of our country. If you look at the present value difference, it's 8 years of GDP. So it's not 1 year of GDP like the official debt, or 2.5 years of GDP like Social Security. But if you put it all together, including the taxes that are coming in, net of the taxes, we're 8 years underwater. We're bankrupt. And I'll just, that's why I ran. I knew we were bankrupt. I knew that we had bridges across the Hudson that were going to break, that were breaking. And I knew that economists knew how to fix it. And so that's why I ran.
Well, I think most of us, I don't think I would be alone in this, but we'd love the concept of having an economist actually running for president of the United States. So, hey, we're going to get this out to a few thousand people. Maybe it will be that opportunity for you to run next time around. Will you run again?
Well, the real thing was I was too young to run last time. So, of course, I'll run again. If we get your listeners to, maybe they should send some money this time.
Well, I think that would be great. I think you picked up a bunch of supporters already just with saying that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. I have had that question of past guests before who have this area of expertise in Social Security. I've said Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, and they say, no, it's not a Ponzi scheme. But I love hearing you say that, because to me, it seems like the definition of a Ponzi scheme.
Oh, it's not just Social Security. You can't really tell from the funding of Social Security or anything. You can't tell whether any particular program is a Ponzi scheme because the labeling is amorphous. You can use words that make it look like a Ponzi scheme. But there's some calculations in economics that are free of how you label them. Just like in physics, there are certain measures like space-time that are free of how you measure things, but time and distance are not free. So economics has that same problem. But when you put everything together comprehensively, and we call it the fiscal gap, that's where I got the 8 years underwater, 8 years of GDP that we're short. In other words, we need to get extra taxes to cover spending to the tune of 8 years of GDP. So we need to dramatically, double taxes to pay our bills through time. That calculation is free of how you label. And the fact that we're in that boat is prima facie evidence of a Ponzi scheme. And it's not just, it's a combination of all these programs that we've been running. And, when you cut tax, I mean, think about this. When you cut the taxes of older people and you say we're going to run deficits and then let younger people pay the interest on it and the principal back, that's all part of it, right? When you switch the structure of taxes from older people and younger people, even if there's no deficit, you're still putting more of a burden on younger people. That's all kind of all part of a Ponzi scheme, that you're burdening the young and future generations to benefit the old. Just like in any chain letter, the first people that get the money make out, everybody else gets stuck holding the bag. So we're bankrupt, and there's not a decent economist. There's lots of indecent economists who will deny this, who will, are politically oriented, who don't want to look at numbers and have magical thinking. You've got people on the left this way, and you've got people on the right this way. But most economists understand this problem, but very few are actually going to go public because they don't want to get yelled at by their relatives on the left or the right over Thanksgiving. I don't give a damn. Okay. My relatives don't yell at me. They just, they actually listen for some reason. And, or we don't discuss economics. They don't want to discuss economics over Thanksgiving. So we don't do it.
Well, I heard you ringing the warning bell in The Power of Zero back in 2018, and now we've had a little bit more stimulus since then. We've had some more money coming off the printing press. What is your current outlook? How has your outlook changed over the last couple of years since I saw you in The Power of Zero?
Yeah, so things are worse. We've had this terrible pandemic, and we've had the proper kind of response to trying to help people that were really hurt worse was to help them with stimulus, with money, but we didn't need to leave the bills for you and the next generation and your kids. We could have said, okay, we're going to raise taxes on people that are doing well during the pandemic, people that don't need to go to work physically, that can continue their jobs. There are a lot of people like me who, so should I have been paying a 15% higher tax during this period? Yes, so that we didn't increase debt to GDP to what is now 100% of GDP. If you go back to 2008, it was 35% of GDP, 100% of GDP today. That's just official debt. I'm not talking about all the off the books Social Security unfunded liabilities, the 8 years, in total fiscal gap. I'm just talking about official debt. We're starting to look like Italy looked back in 2008. Back in 2008, when we had this world financial crisis, everybody was pointing the finger at Italy, saying, "Gee, they're in terrible shape. They have a debt to GDP ratio, around 100%. Maybe it was 120. It was big. We're there." And now Italy is much, maybe 160% of GDP. And some people think that this can just go on, but something that can't go on will stop, and it will stop very abruptly and badly. There was a famous head of the Council of Economic Advisors who used to say, I forget, he was under Nixon, I forget the name at this point. He used to say, something that can't go on will end. But what I'm saying is that something that can't go on will stop poorly. Just like if you're running and you can't continue to run because there's a cliff in front of you and you go over the cliff, it will stop, but very badly.
So the question becomes, when does it stop? I mean, there's some out there that believe that we can outgrow our debt. There's some that say the debt itself is simply irrelevant. Can we dig ourselves out of this hole, or is it just too late?
It's pretty darn late. Just like with climate change, it's pretty darn late. We can put on a carbon tax and probably reduce the problem in half, but we can't get out from under it. What we're doing now, we need to have a major restructuring of our fiscal side, healthcare reform to lower the spending, tax reform to get the super rich to pay. Super rich pay nothing. because they just borrow against their assets. They never declare any they have all their assets in securities that experience capital gains. They pass them to their kids in the form of, tax-free step-up in basis. So there's no income taxation of the super rich at all. These people pay absolutely nothing. This is why Trump got away with paying nothing for years. And how do they live their lavish lifestyle? They just borrow against their assets, and they never sell their assets. They leave it to the kids with what's called a step-up in basis. So the capital gain is forgiven. So so we need to fix this, and we're not doing it. We need to fix the structure and the level of the spending, bring that down, the overall level, bring the overall level of taxes up, get our fiscal house in order, get that fiscal gap, which is 8 years of GDP, down to zero. We have to do major things there. We're not doing them. What we're doing is printing money to pay our bills. We're running up these official, the Fed, Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, is buying up bonds all the time, putting money out there. And the bonds he's buying up are both private and government bonds. So we're going to have a little dance here between the Treasury and the Federal Reserve, such that we end up just printing money to pay for what the government spends. Let me just for a second explain this to you so it's crystal clear. Let's suppose that you, Casey, are the president and you want to get a chicken for lunch, okay? So what you do is you have it, but you don't want to tax me, ask me to grab the money for me in taxes to pay for your chicken. So what you do is you have the Treasury sell a Treasury bond to somebody. He hands you some money back in exchange. You take the money and you go buy the chicken, okay? So now you have the chicken. The same amount of money is out there in the private economy because the money just went from the guy who bought the bond to the guy you sold the chicken to. So we got the same amount of money out there. But now the Federal Reserve, in the next part of this act, this dance, they print up some new money and they go buy that bond, okay? Now the net picture here is that the private sector has more money and you have the chicken, okay? This is how we print money as a combined government. The Treasury plus the Federal Reserve combined prints money to buy you the chicken. And that's what we've been doing. We've been printing money to the tune of a six-fold increase in the amount of money that the Federal Reserve has added to the economy. There's been a six-fold increase since 2008. The statistics are sitting right there on the web at the St. Louis Fed. Anybody can check base money supply, 6 times bigger than it was. So when you run policies, when you're printing this much money to pay for the chickens come home to roost, and that comes out in the form of inflation. So countries that are in fiscally unsustainable positions, the first thing they do politically is they resort to printing money. And you see that exactly happening in our country. And then inflation takes off, and then the fear of future inflation leads interest rates to rise, and that leads money to circulate more rapidly. And faster money is like more money. It's like becomes like a hot potato. And now you have, potential for full-fledged inflation, and that ends up as hyperinflation. Now, in our country, we have the kind of basics in place for a 6 to 12-fold increase in the price level. And we're starting to see supply prices going up. Now, people will say properly that what we're seeing right now with a 5.5% inflation that we've seen over the last 12 months or so, is supply chain shortages, which is absolutely true. Lumber and so forth have gone up. So, but what happens is with the psychology of inflation is that prices start to go up, and then companies will say, well, gee, all these other people are raising their prices for whatever reason. Maybe it is supply side, maybe it is just like one-off situation, but now is a good opportunity for me to raise my prices because my customers won't be upset. They'll see that all the other prices are going up around the economy, or lots of other prices are going up. So therefore, I'll raise my prices. So you have this kind of opportunistic price setting. And then the psychology of inflation gets rolling, and that leads to money becoming more of a hot potato, and you end up with what we saw in the last 22 years in countries that need to continue to print money to pay their bills. You end up with hyperinflation. We had 22 hyperinflations in the last century. In this century, we've seen places like Argentina and if you look at Venezuela today with hyperinflation, countries, we're not immune to getting into very difficult times with respect to prices, to price increases, to having hyperinflation happen in our country. So I would be very careful if I were investing in long-term. I would not be investing in long-term nominal bonds. If right now you can buy a 30-year treasury bond, it's yielding 2%. So it's going to pay you back this small stream of dollar bills, and then at the end, it'll pay you back your principal 30 years from now. Now, what happens if the price of a hot dog goes from, when I was a kid, you could buy a hot dog for a quarter. It's now maybe $5. Levitz's hot dog, at the Grand Central Station probably is $5 if you're lucky, or maybe outside on the street on 42nd Street. What if it's $2,000? 30 years from now, when you're getting your principal repaid, which is that fixed nominal amount of money, it's going to be worth nothing, right? In real terms, your purchasing power is going to get completely wiped out. Well, in the last year, we've seen people lose 5.4% of their purchasing power on all those government bonds that they're holding, and all the corporate bonds, any fixed nominal security, or if you just hold cash, you've lost 5.4% purchasing power. So let me make it this analogy or example. If you're a Delta Airlines pilot, you retired 10 years ago and you have a fixed nominal pension, or a Detroit policeman who's retired. And so you got a fixed amount of dollar bills coming in until you die in the form of an annuity, a pension. Well, you just lost 5.4% of your pay. Now, Jerome Powell, forever, and real, of your income, not your pay, you're not working, of your real living standard has just dropped 5.4%. Jerome Powell, the Fed, chairman, who's, I think, a terrific person and terrific economist, even though he's not formally trained that way, and doing a great job to the extent he can. He'll tell you, no big deal, it's just temporary. But these people have permanently lost 5.4% of their living standard. How can you say it's temporary? This is not going to, it's only temporary if you're going to have the prices go back down, but they're permanently higher. And then he's saying, well, they won't go yet higher by another 5.4% over the next 12 months. He doesn't know for sure. He's hoping. He's trying to jawbone people who are setting prices not to raise prices, but he doesn't know. So the damage has already been done. The reason governments print money is to pay their bills, and the public gets hit through the inflation tax, which is prices go up and then we lose value on our nominal holdings of assets. Our nominal assets, our pensions that are fixed in nominal terms, our cash in our checking account, they lose value. So it's a real transfer, a real tax on the public to pay for those chickens. That's, the bottom line is, we've got the chickens to eat, and somebody gets to eat them, and somehow the government's engaged in a game here where the public gets fewer chickens to eat and the government gets more to eat, and it's through this inflationary tax. Anyway, I can't help but give these lectures because I'm a professor, and
well, I think we would all enjoy having a Larry Kotlikoff, that has a common sense approach. And it does seem like you have some ideas on how this gets fixed. I'm not sure we're going to get a Larry Kotlikoff in the White House. And so how do you actually envision this?
maybe you'll be my campaign manager.
Yeah, well, give me a call. If you were to pull out a crystal ball, and if you had one, what do you actually predict happens in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you think we actually end up in the next 5 to 10 years? And I want to make sure we get into Social Security because that's such a huge element of this.
Well, I expect higher taxes because we're going to, we're going to have less spending. We are, yes, having an infrastructure bill, but is that the proper amount of infrastructure? Is it really keeping up with GDP? Probably not. So we're going to see cutbacks in healthcare because that's becoming far too affordable. And we're seeing that in ways that the private sector is seeing higher co-pays out of, crappier health insurance policies, and Medicare doesn't cover everything these days. So we're going to see nickel and diming, but fundamentally, we're not going to see the problem fully addressed. And we're going to see continued money printing, and we're going to probably see inflation get out of control. And then the Fed will probably try and step on the brakes, and we'll have another recession, which isn't really going to fix the fundamentals. The fundamentals are you have to do a long-term planning, budgeting, and say, oh, here's all the spending we want to do. Here's all the taxes we've got coming in. And it doesn't match. Any household would take a look finally and say, we're broke. We have to cut our spending, and we have to go out and work more, get more money. And that's what the country had. We have to have a president who's not living in, for the next election. He's living for the next generation. I think President Biden cares a whole lot about our kids and common man, but he's persuaded, he's surrounded by people that have that tell him things that they'd like to hear, or that maybe they think he'd like to hear. They're not telling him the reality of our fiscal position. And President Trump, I think that was hopeless too. So anyway.
Well, a huge part of this is Social Security.
I've lived on both of these guys for a long time.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. Let's transition to Social Security. And you mentioned the word entitlement programs. And as we get into Social Security, I just want you to settle a debate for me. And that is that a lot of individuals will say it's not an entitlement program. Yeah, well, it's my money. I'm not entitled to this, or it's kind of a silly argument in my opinion. However, I just want to hear it from you. Why do they call it an entitlement program if it's yours?
Words are flexible. We can be calling, I could be speaking French about Social Security, and you could be speaking in German about our Social Security system. And you could be describing it as an entitlement program. You're putting in, you're certainly paying your Social Security payroll taxes, and you have an account, and you have an earnings history, and your benefits are tied to that. So that certainly looks like, just contributing to a 401k. And somebody else can say, who's speaking in a different language, like German, can say, well, no, it's not really a private account. It's more, there's nothing legal. You have no legal ownership over those benefits. Congress can change them at any time. And therefore, Congress is just reauthorizing to give you money. You're just being given a benefit. So that's the sense in which it's an entitlement. You're entitled to it because you're an older American, let's say, or you're a poor American that needs Social Security disability benefits. I think this whole discussion is kind of besides the fact. What we have to really look at is, are we able to make how much are our current older people getting to consume in the end? And how much less are our current and future kids going to get to consume because our older people are spending so much, consuming so much? And is this a result of a 70-year policy of having the elderly consume more at the cost of the young and future generations spending less. So this is a pattern of policy that's ongoing. And if you look through time, you see that the consumption of the elderly has risen dramatically relative to that of young people. So that's exactly what if you go back to 1960, the typical elderly household was consuming about 70% of what a 45-year-old household was consuming. Today, they're probably consuming twice as much as a 45-year-old household. Now, why is that? Why did that happen? Well, that has a lot to do with government policy. So, and that has a lot to do with cutting taxes, having tax cuts so that older people get to spend the rest of their lives without paying taxes. And then there's a bigger debt, and now we have to pay higher taxes to cover the debt, or print more money to roll over the debt, or to use the printing press, and then inflation takes off, and the young people end up, holding the bag. I mean, you yourself probably have some money in cash. You just lost 5.4% of it this year. How do you feel about that? That's because, in part because this is a very subtle way in which you're paying me my Social Security benefit. It's so, in other words, taking this whole big thing with lots of moving parts and focusing on one thing will miss the entire big picture. The big picture is a process of a transition process where we're taking from the young and giving to the old through a whole lot of different mechanisms through a long period of time. And this kind of will end badly. It will end, and it will end badly. And it's like having a cancer that's growing. And you go to the doctor, and the doctor says, you got a cancer, but I'm just going to it's not so bad. I'm going to take out a quarter of it today. You'll come back in 5 years, you come back in 5 years, it's twice as big. Oh, it's not so bad. I'll just take out a quarter of it. And this goes on 3 times. The 4th time you come back and you die on the table because it's taken over several organs or something. That's kind of what we're up to here. And I've been writing about this for decades. I've written several different books for the public and done these measurements. I started something with co-authors called Generational Accounting to really understand the burden we're leaving to our kids. I've looked at the consumption picture of the young versus the old, looked at this from a lot of different angles, compared our country with foreign countries. European countries are in much better long-term shape than we are. We're in the worst shape of any developed country, fiscally speaking. So it's no wonder that if you look at our infrastructure, it sucks, that bridges are falling down, that we have potholes everywhere, that we have tunnels. Drive through the Callahan Tunnel in Boston. It looks like a third world country. Why is it we're not funding this National Science Foundation properly? Why is it that so many things are not working in this country? Why education is at 5th rate? Why we have like the 30th ranking in healthcare for prenatal healthcare? Why we don't provide pre-K for all the kids in the country? Other countries do this because they have responsible governments who look forward, not just to the next election.
It seems like we're in a catch-22 then when it comes to our Social Security decision. You've talked about inflation. And so if we're facing a higher rate of inflation in the future, then it's best that we delay those Social Security payments as long as we possibly can. But then on the other side, you say the system is doomed and Social Security is broke. So why should we, then that says, well, we should take it as soon as we can.
Okay, good question. So I've been talking about the big kind of national financial picture, but if we're talking about individuals, you have to do the best you can do individually. Now, individually, I think the adjustment for Social Security will not happen through benefit cuts, especially for the middle class. And if benefits are cut, they're going to cut whether you take the benefit early at 62 or whether you wait till you're 70 and you get a 76% higher number. So yes, benefit cuts do tend to make the advantage from waiting till 70 to get a 76% inflation protected higher benefit for the rest of your life if we're talking about retirement benefits, it does make it a little, less valuable compared to taking your benefits immediately, but there's still a huge gain from waiting. So what I would say is for most people, it's even if benefits are going to be cut, and I don't know, and that will probably be the last resort. They might default on U.S. federal debt first, because a good chunk of that federal debt, probably over half right now, is held by foreigners. So are you going to default on your voters, or are you going to default on the Chinese? You're going to default on the Chinese, right? If you're, if you're a politician. So, so I don't see benefits being cut. I see taxes being raised. And so higher income people are going to be facing taxation probably on 100% of the Social Security benefits as soon as they start collecting them. It'll just be treated like regular income. I see payroll taxes being levied on people earning more than $400,000. Now, one of the big concerns I have in the way we, quote, try and fix these things, and we're always doing too little too late, is that we'll leave people with no incentive to work. Think about somebody who's earning $500,000 a year. Maybe they're highly productive, or maybe they got their job from their dad, and it was just, but maybe they actually are contributing a lot to society, and not just buying yachts with their money. Maybe they're giving charity. Let's make the best case for the rich here. Okay, so now they're going to face like a 40% federal income tax if President Biden has his way, a 14%, a 12.4% Social Security tax, a 2.7% Medicare tax. There's a high income Medicare earnings tax, an extra tax, several percentage points. Their state income taxes can be as high as 13% in California. When you start putting this all together, you got these people in a 70% tax bracket and then their sales taxes, which are also a disincentive to work, because if I work and earn money and I buy something, bingo, got to pay the sales tax. I don't get, as many peanuts when I go buy the peanuts. So when you put it all together, what we have in mind here is doing to the rich, the super rich and the rich, what we're doing to poor people, which is locking them out of the work market, the labor market. If you look at the poorest 20% of Americans, and there's a paper at Kotlikoff.net about marginal taxation of Americans' labor supply, take the bottom 20%, 1/4 of these people are in 70% or higher marginal tax brackets. When you put together all the things they lose when they work, they lose money because they have to pay taxes, all kinds of taxes. They lose their food stamps, they lose their welfare benefits, they lose their, they can lose their housing support, they can lose all kinds of different benefit programs. And when, combined, that puts them in a very high marginal tax bracket to the point where they have no incentive to work. They're locked into poverty. So that's the real nightmare here, that we have this kind of Byzantine fiscal system that's, structurally out of control, not generating enough revenue. And then we engage in fixes which lead people to stop working, which produces even less revenue. So that's why you need to rationalize the whole thing, lower the spending, raise the taxes, but do it in a way so everybody has the same incentive to work. So when I ran for president, in this platform book called You're Hired, it's free download again on my website, Kotlikoff.net, I talked about how do you get everybody into a 30% marginal tax bracket, rich, poor, middle class. How do you fix all the programs collectively so that everybody has the same incentive to work? And there was a way to do it. It's not that hard. So, because all the solutions that I propose here are 6 to 10 bullets. They're not 50-page proposals. They're very simple. It doesn't take, complicated things to get this thing fixed.
Well, it sounds simple, but Social Security is more than, what, 8 bullet points. So there's 2,728 rules. So what do you say to someone when they ask you, when should I file for Social Security?
Well, for a lot of people, for most people, it should be you wait till you're till 70 to take your retirement benefit. But that might be true for 75 to 85% of the households. But then you have households that that are widowed, for example, and there's you want to decide when to take your widow's benefit versus your retirement benefit. Depending on your situation and your deceased spouse or your deceased ex-spouse's, former spouse's earnings record, it may be best to take the widow's benefit first and the retirement benefit at 70, or it may be better to take the retirement benefit at 62 and the widow's benefit closer to full retirement age or at full retirement age. So this is where, the software that I've developed through my company, we have this, tool, Maxify Planner, which is a full financial planning tool. And then we have this other tool, which is called Maximize My Social Security, which is just about Social Security. That's, I think, $49. I would run that. I would run that no matter who you are, whether you're rich, poor, middle class, because we have worked on this tool for 28 years. The company's been in business. We're completely anal. The guy who's programming that part of the code is the former head of research of the Army Corps of Engineers. We have a technical expert on our company who's worked for Social Security for 30 years. So we have, this 2,728 rules is just the beginning of the complexity of Social Security. So we have this stuff down because we've had people and myself focus on this nonstop. I wrote a whole book with 2 co-authors called Get What's Yours. It became a New York Times bestseller. It's all about the details. So I would say, read the book. It's only like $5 from Amazon. Buy the software. It's cheap. Do not ask Social Security a damn thing. Tell them what to do, because Social Security will half the time tell you the exactly wrong thing. They could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars with their quote advice. They'll tell you things that are misleading or incomplete. Let me give you just one example, a quick example. You have people that I met a guy who had pancreatic cancer, and he'd just been diagnosed about a month before. And I met him at a party, and a dinner party, lovely guy. He says, I heard you wrote a book about Social Security. I went to Social Security. They said, well, you should take your benefit immediately. You're 68, pancreatic cancer. It's a no-brainer. Let's sign you up. He signs up. I said, I noticed you have your wife's here. Did she work? Did she have an earnings history? No. She always stayed home and watched the kids and did other things. I earned all the money. I said, did the Social Security folks ask you about that? He said, no. I said, they gave you the wrong advice. What you need to do is go back and tell them you want to withdraw that application. And because if you wait for 2 years and don't take a penny, you may not ever live to collect a penny yourself, but your widow's benefit, the benefit for your wife, will be 16% higher because she's going to collect your check in your bigger case. And you want to make your check as big as possible. So by waiting, you get these things called delayed retirement credits, and they're 8% a year. They don't compound, but they're 8%. So now we're talking 16% higher since you're 68. So so what they did is they didn't think comprehensively, Social Security, about family benefits, lifetime benefits. They just thought about the individual benefits, and you really want to maximize lifetime family benefits. And what one person can do in Social Security affects the other, a spouse's, what spouse can do and vice versa. So it's a joint decision. It's very complicated, even though there are only, 13 benefits. Our software covers 11, the most important 11 benefits. But most people don't even know about these benefits. They know about the retirement benefit. They don't know if you're divorced, having been married for 10 years, you can get spousal benefits. Or if you're married and you're watching a disabled child, for example, you can get spousal child and care spousal benefits, so you can get paid to be home to watch your child. All these benefits that are available, all of which have catch-22s. That's where the software really, you need to have expert software to get this stuff right.
You hit on something which is probably the number one way that I find that individuals are making the Social Security decision. They say, well, it's all about how long I'm going to live. And we also see the same analysis being done by financial advisors. I'd say the majority of the engineers that I see come in and visit with our team, they've got a spreadsheet and they're looking at it from a break-even standpoint. But you say that the break-even analysis is not the way to evaluate Social Security. Can you explain why that is?
Yeah, because none of us is going to die on time. Okay, so our life expectancy is an average, is the average age at which we're going to die. So we have this big risk, which is how long are we going to live? The worst case scenario is we live to 100. I'm talking about worst case in terms of financially worst case. Psychologically, it's the best case. Nobody wants to die, basically. But financially, dying right away is the best thing, in terms of how much you have to pay for yourself in the future if you're not working, if you're retired. And I'm not encouraging anybody to commit suicide here, just to be clear, okay? I'm just trying to be a hard-nosed economist. Nobody should think about that as a way to deal with their finances. But financially speaking, living a long time is a major risk. And you can't play the averages, just like you can't say, well, on average, I'm not going to have a car crash, so I don't need car insurance. On average, my house isn't going to burn down, so I'm not going to need homeowners insurance. No, you look at the worst case scenario. Here, financially speaking, the worst case scenario is that you don't die on time, which nobody does. You don't die exactly on the average day. You're going to die. You die at a very old age. And many, many people are doing that. So you make it to 100 or 98. My mom died at 98, right? So you want to have a way to insure you against that situation, because you have to keep paying for the person, pay for yourself right up through 98, 100. So by waiting to 70 to collect your retirement benefit, what you're doing is you're giving up 8 years of benefits. That's a price you're paying in order to buy a higher stream of benefits, which is an annuity. So you're buying an annuity by waiting from the government, and it's a safe annuity, and it's 76% higher number. It's a big spread going out right through retirement, through age 100. Now, that's the best deal going. A lot of people hit retirement age, and they say, well, I'm going to make a killing on my money in the stock market. I won't take my IRA money and use it now. I'll take my Social Security early. It's completely the wrong mistake. It's a huge mistake. If people ran our Maxify software, they would see this was nuts. You can't count on getting a high return on the stock market because it's risky. After you risk adjust the stock market return, it's yielding a negative return. The risk adjustment these days is enormous. Inflation index bonds, which are...
Can you explain that for a minute, Larry, for those that don't understand how it could be negative risk adjusted?
So right now, today, as we talk, if you looked online at the Treasury yield curve, you could just Google Treasury yield curve, real yield curve, you'll see that inflation index bonds, so these are the bonds that the government sells you, that when inflation takes off, they don't just say, we're going to pay you the same amount. They say, we're going to pay you 5% more if inflation was 5% higher this year. That coupon payment, that principal payment 30 years out will be 5% bigger because inflation this year was 5% bigger, was higher. The prices went up by 5%. Next year, if they go up at 7%, we're going to raise that principal payment by another 7%. So they're called Treasury Inflation Protected Securities, or TIPS, TIPS. And they're yielding over a 30-year period, because they're yielding negative 33 basis points, which is, they're not even yielding a 0% return. They're yielding a negative 0.33% return. So that means that if you invest in these things, you'll know for sure that you're going to end up losing money, but you'll have something. You won't have lost your whole shirt. With the stock market, that's an alternative investment. But the fact that these two investments are selling on the financial market simultaneously, and one is yielding one that is perfectly safe, yielding a negative 33 basis points, and one is highly volatile. On average, it's yielding like 6.5% real, but it can, from one year to the next, it can be up an extra 20% or down an extra 20%. The fact, the trade-off is right there. The fact that people are deciding at the margin to not invest in the stock market and to go into the safe thing means that the risk premium is about 6.5%. So when you risk adjust, if you're comparing Social Security, which is risk-free, with the stock market, you have to risk adjust the stock market because it comes with this extra bad thing, which is the risk. So you have to take the risk out before you do this calculation. So you have to say to yourself, gee, my IRA, if I take my IRA, if I think I'm going to count on my IRA doing well, I have to worry about the risk. And once you worry about the risk, you have to say, well, I have to think about the IRA as being converted into a safe asset and yielding only negative 33 basis points. And Social Security's got this enormous return. It's much, much bigger than negative 33 basis points. It's positive, huge. So I'm going to take the IRA early, and the smart thing to do will be to take the IRA money early, pay off your mortgage, which is yielding has a high interest rate, and then waiting until 70 to take Social Security. So the software program helps you see these possibilities. And then I realized that most people don't like to run software. So I'll just put in another plug here because it's kind of timely. So I wrote a book recently that's coming out in January called Money Magic, an economist's secrets to more money, less risk, and a better life, which I've been running the software for so many years with clients and seeing what they've done with it. And I thought it'd be important to encapsulate all the completely safe ways to have a better, financial outcome that people are not aware of. Because Wall Street, you referenced Wall Street, they're focused on things that are going to make them money. The reason they focus on life expectancy is they're trying to get people to take their Social Security early so they leave their IRA money. You're going to try and tell people you're going to die on time, so it doesn't pay for you to wait to take Social Security. Therefore, take your Social Security now, give it to us to invest. We'll charge you. We'll get these great rates of return for you, but we'll also have to charge you fees, right? They're selling product. This is a con job. This is a bait and switch. And everywhere you look in the way the conventional financial planning works, the way Wall Street is advising people, everything that they do, the way their software is set up, it's all set up to sell product. And we don't sell a single thing in my little software company. I have this on the side. I've been doing this for 28 years. I don't take a salary. I love it because it helps people. And I've got great employees, and we're a great little American company, and we actually tell people the truth, and we don't try and sell them something extra and lie to them about their finances. So that's been my fun project.
Well, we've leveraged your software for that very reason. And when it comes to the Social Security piece, I mean, these kind of start off as two separate pieces. So let's say that someone walks them through your software, someone else's Social Security software, and they discover that this should be their filing strategy in order to maximize their lifetime benefits. Now, they want to take that information and plug it into, say, Maxify or some other piece of financial planning software and they want to start stress testing it, right? I think most financial planners, they're using, say, a Monte Carlo simulation or something along those lines to stress test against market volatility. If they're doing a good job on the tax planning side, they're stress testing against higher taxes in the future. How might someone, or what variables might they twist around when it comes to stress testing their Social Security, taking into consideration some of the things you've mentioned, the potential changes to taxes, maybe even inflation adjustments or cost of living adjustments for Social Security? How should they stress test that Social Security benefit?
So our Maxify tool has all the Social Security code. So you wouldn't need to do the Social Security analysis. You can just do it right there in the Maxify tool. It's a comprehensive lifetime financial planning tool, but it lets you stress test inflation by setting, you can run a profile where inflation in 5 years goes up for a long time. You can run a profile where Social Security benefits are cut and then see whether the gain to weighting still makes sense. You can, and the program will also try and robo-optimize for you based on any kind of settings that you enter. You can specify payroll taxes rising. You can specify at the personal level, like the need to go into a nursing home and think about whether you should buy home health care insurance or nursing care insurance, whether it's worth it or whether you should try and self-insure. So there's it's not really stress testing, but when you think about choosing when to retire, you can set up a profile where you retire early and versus when you retire later, and you can see the price of retiring in terms of how much it lowers your living standard. Every question in economics and personal finance begins and ends with your living standard. Every question that the Wall Street firms, the Fidelities, the T. Rowe Prices, the TIAA-CREFs, all those companies are focused not on your living standard, they're focused on your wealth. And you don't care about your wealth once you die. When you're in heaven, you're not going to be really happy because you died with a lot of money, right? You're just going to be in heaven. You don't need money in heaven. So what you really care about is having a high living standard, high as possible, that's safe and sustainable. And that's what the software is really about. And yes, stress testing is very important because we have these risks coming from the government, but also we do run Monte Carlo simulations related to your portfolio. If you're holding a risky portfolio or whatever portfolio you're holding, we show you the ups and downs of your living standard, assuming you're going to adjust your spending every year in light of your living standard, in light of how the market has done. If you have a lot of money in stocks and they all crash this year, our software assumes that you're going to cut your spending in light of that, so that from that point on, you'll be able to have a smooth, you're going to be trying to plan to have a smooth ride from that point on. Most all the other tools are assuming that you never adjust. Their Monte Carlo simulations are absolutely stupid. They're ridiculous. They have no connection to anything any economist would view as reasonable. We have this complete dichotomy, this complete divide between economics-based financial planning, the kind of stuff that's taught in every finance program in the country. If you look at the top 50 finance programs from MIT on down, not a single one of them will spend even 2 minutes on the financial planning methodology that's being used by hundreds of thousands of financial planners out there working for tens of thousands of major Wall Street firms. We will not spend a minute on that stuff because we know that methodology is not connected to anything reasonable and is all based on product sales. On their side, the financial planning certificate programs, there's about 20 of them, like the Certified Financial Planning Program or the Registered Investment Advisor Program. They don't spend even 2 minutes talking about the economic theory or the economics approach to financial planning, the idea of trying to have a smooth living standard, which is called consumption smoothing, that goes back 100 years to the work of Irving Fisher. So we're not teaching their stuff. They're not teaching our stuff. What do you make of that, Casey? We got, it's like imagine you had of people being treated for medical problems solely by chiropractors who are giving people false elixirs. This would put us back to like 1880. Okay, that's what the state of our, that's the situation right now with financial planning in the U.S. Mm-hmm. We have people being treated by financial quacks, left, right, and center, and their advice has no connection whatsoever to. They're going to tell you you're going to die at your life expectancy. They're going to tell you they're going to use these Monte Carlo simulations that assume that you're saving the right amount right now for the next through retirement, which is absolutely crazy because most people are saving totally the wrong amount. They're going to assume that you're going to spend some targeted level that's the wrong amount in retirement. And then they're going to make this third crazy assumption, which is that you're not going to adjust your spending if the market goes up or down right through the end of your days. And then they're going to see whether this plan, your plan that entails three major mistakes: saving the wrong amount before retirement, spending the wrong amount after retirement, never adjusting those three mistakes, whether that plan fails, what fraction of the time that plan fails. That's their Monte Carlo methodology. Whether you look at any of these companies, software, they're all doing the same thing. Money Guide Pro, eMoney, Right Capital, they're all doing things that no economist would view as remotely responsible or sensible. And that's the state of the art. So, but this is why I really got into the program. This is why I've been so incensed by this. Even you can feel it, you can hear it in my voice. I'm angry at this industry for conning people, and I'm angry for 28 years now. Very angry about the way they've been misleading people. I'm also angry with the federal government, and I've written several books about it, and that's why I ran for president. So I'm trying to do things to make a difference, and I'm making a small difference for some people, but that's what got me into economics. I wanted to try and I saw that this profession, this set of knowledge, could be used to help people nationally and personally. And that's what drove me into economics. The alternative was becoming a doctor. But as I write in this book, Money Magic, the first day of biology talked me out of biology, about to be out of medicine, because I couldn't handle torturing this frog that I had to dissect. So that was that.
Well, Larry, I think we all love the concept of a presidential candidate that is not out to make any friends, but really put us all in a better position over the long run. I totally agree with you. I mean, if we look at, I went through the CFP program, right? It's all built largely around accumulation and not decumulation, or generating income that's sustainable over lifetime. I think out of all of the designations that are out there, there's really only one that's even formulated for retirement income, the retirement income certified professional designation. Larry, I know the question that everyone wants to ask you right now. You're 70 years old, second marriage in 6 years, and you've been 6 years married to your second spouse. And I think we want to know, what has Larry's strategy been? What has been your Social Security, your spouse's Social Security strategy, your ex-spouse's Social Security strategy? Can we hear that from you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Any question you want to ask me about my personal finances, I'm happy to answer here or later. But let me just say, I want to just kind of modify. I was just on this kind of rift where I was lambasting the financial industry. And I am angry about the financial industry, but the personal financial planners are stuck with these tools by and large because that's what they've been told to use and trained to use in their programs. But when it comes to actually helping people, they help people a hell of a lot because they modify their advice in light of their common sense. And that's what economics is really about, common sense. So, but back to your question, Case. So I don't have a beef with financial planners. I don't have a beef with people that have the CFP certificate. I think these people are trying to do their best by the public. And I know lots of financial planners who are using those software tools. Many cases are just forced to by their bigger companies. And they're my buddies. So I'm not, here to make, down and denigrate anybody who's trying to help people. And most are. But personally, I waited till 70, and my ex-spouse, who I was married to for about 28 years, who we're close friends with, she's going to wait till full retirement age to take her spouse benefit. And because I waited till 70, she'll get a higher widow's benefit, the highest possible widow's benefit when I pass, a divorced spousal widow's benefit. And my current spouse, the same thing. She'll wait till 70 to take her full retirement benefit because she has a bigger earnings record. My ex-spouse will collect based on, it'll most likely behoove her to wait because she didn't have much of an earnings record to wait to take her spouse benefit starting at full retirement age rather than waiting until 70. That would be a mistake, and our software would pick that up. And then both will collect off of my record. And it's not like I could have had 4 different wives that I was married to for 10 years each. They could each collect from a widow's benefit or a spousal benefit off of my record with no interconnection. One doesn't reduce the other person's benefit. The Congress was smart enough to know that they didn't want the white males who set this whole thing up didn't want their exes fighting with each other. So they set it up that way. And there's so many aspects, by the way, of Social Security that are sexist. It's unbelievable. If you get remarried before 60, you lose the potential to get a spousal benefit. And then you can't also collect a widow's benefit based on your deceased spouse. But if you wait, former spouse, but if you wait till 60, when presumably your looks are not as good because we're not looking as good as we get older, generally speaking, or I think that's the general perception. Some people like the looks of older people, but if you wait till 60, then it's okay. Now you can collect your spouse benefit on your former spouse. Now you can collect a widow's benefit. So that's terrible. Why should people have to wait 10 years to be married before they get divorced in order for the one of the spouses who's maybe stayed home and watched the kid in order to let the other spouse get a career going? Why should that person have to be married a full 10 years before they can collect a penny based on their ex's work record? This stuff needs to be fixed. I mean, there's a whole slew. There's like 20 things. I wrote a column, it's at Kotlikoff.net. If you search for 20 sexist aspects of Social Security, there's 20 provisions in Social Security that are highly sexist. It looks symmetric in the way things are written, but when you think about the fact that women bring up children and they and they sacrifice their careers to do that, and they end up with lower earnings histories, in effect, it turns out to be highly sexist, the program, and we need to fix it.
Well, if your head is spinning after this conversation with Larry and all the different ways to leverage your strategy, stress test your strategy, and just what software to use, I've got a couple options for you. One, give us a call or visit retirewithpurpose.com. We'll be more than happy to walk you through Larry's software, Maxify, as well as maximizing your Social Security benefit, integrating those two softwares together. We'll be happy to take you through that. Maybe you're not ready for that step yet. Maybe you're just trying to get used to the basics of Social Security and make that decision before you take the next step. Well, we're going to give away Larry's book right now, which was titled Get What's Yours, The Secrets to Maxing Out Your Social Security. If you'd like to get a free copy of that book, all you have to do is this, write an honest rating and review for the podcast on iTunes, and then shoot us an email at info@howardbailey.com with your iTunes username, and we will be obliged to send you out the book for absolutely free. Larry, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to hopefully having you back on here in a few months as you launch your next book, Money Magic, An Economist's Secret to More Money, Less Risk, and a Better Life.
Great, Casey. Love to come back.
Thanks, Larry.
Good talking to you. A lot of fun.